Good afternoon and welcome to this technical briefing on high altitude object. Bonjour et bienvenue à la séance d'information technique sur les objets à haute altitude. We'll start with some opening statement and then we'll move on to a question period hosted on Zoom. So for the reporter on Zoom, if you have a question, I invite you to use the raise hand function. Nous allons commencer avec des allocutions d'ouverture, puis nous passerons à la période de questions sur Zoom. J'invite les reporters sur Zoom à utiliser la fonction main levée si vous avez une question. To the panelists, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure that I'm next on deck. Is that what you're asking? I guess so. So I'll start. Good afternoon, all, and thank you for being with us this afternoon. I am Major General Paul Prévost. I'm the Director of Staff, Director of Strategic Joint Staff here at National Defense in Ottawa. Over the past 2 weeks, the North American Defense Command, a Canada-U.S. binational military command, has detected, tracked, monitored, and positively identified 4 airborne objects in the United States and Canadian airspace. The first object was officially characterized as a high-altitude surveillance balloon and attributed to the People's Republic of China. The subsequent 3 cannot be officially characterized or attributed at this time. Recovery operations are ongoing. Under the direction of national leadership, the 4 objects have been taken down over U.S. and Canadian airspace. The first instance was the air balloon taken down on 4th of February, which we have confirmed is of Chinese origin. Another object was shut down in Alaska on February 10th, last Friday. Another object over Yukon airspace on February 11th, this last Saturday. And the final one was over Lake Huron yesterday. Chacune de ces missions a été menée avec la plus grande prudence et en coordination avec la Federal Aviation Administration et Transport Canada afin de garantir la sécurité des Canadiens et des Américains. Et comme pour les missions précédentes, l'objet volant au-dessus du lac Huron a été abattu dans la zone où il est peu probable que cette intervention constitue une menace pour les civils ou nos citoyens se trouvant en dessous. La sécurité des Canadiens et des Américains demeure notre priorité absolue. Nous poursuivons nos efforts de recherche afin de recueillir des renseignements supplémentaires sur ces objets, en travaillant en étroite collaboration avec nos partenaires américains et canadiens. In Yukon, search efforts are being led by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. My RCMP colleague will provide additional details on the overall effort, but I can share the following information regarding the support of the Canadian Armed Forces is providing. Under the lead of our Canadian Special Forces Command, personnel and air assets across from the Canadian Armed Forces and the Royal Canadian Air Force have been mobilized in Yukon in both Whitehorse and Dawson City. They are supporting the initial search efforts and the RCMP's underground recovery efforts to follow. La zone de recherche est vaste, couvrant près de 3000 km² dans une région éloignée et montagneuse avec une couverture de neige profonde qui est sujette à des conditions météorologiques difficiles. Ce sont des conditions de recherche difficiles et nous faisons tout en notre pouvoir pour mener cette mission avec succès, tout en s'assurant de la sécurité de notre personnel. Avec le soutien des nombreuses ressources des Forces armées canadiennes, nos forces spéciales et l'aviation royale canadienne déploient tous les efforts possibles pour trouver et sécuriser l'objet. Une fois que nous aurons trouvé l'objet, nous aiderons la GRC à sécuriser le site pour l'aider à recueillir toutes les preuves initiales dont elle a besoin avant de participer à l'extraction de ces objets. Ces intrusions sont non autorisées dans l'espace aérien nord-américain et sont troublantes. Mais les interventions conjointes du Canada et des États-Unis par l'entremise du NORAD et celles des autres groupes participants aux efforts de récupération et de l'identification ont été exemplaires. These unprecedented activities have underscored how important our binational military command continues to be and how important it is that NORAD continue to evolve to meet the changing threat environment. We are committed in keeping Canadians and Americans safe, and we will remain in contact with our U.S. partners to ensure binational response to all the situations where a coordinated approach is required. Thank you.
Thanks, Pepe. I think I'll jump in here. Afternoon, colleagues. I'm Derek Traherne. I'm the Director General of the Government Operations Center. And as Pepe just mentioned, obviously our top priority here for all of us is the safety and protection of Canadians. Along with the Department of National Defence, the public safety portfolio, of which I am a part, is closely involved in Canada's ongoing and evolving response to these high altitude objects over the country and over North America. Obviously, the public safety portfolio includes the RCMP, national security experts, as well as the Government Operations Center, or the GOC, which is housed in public safety. My organization provides for integrated federal response, coordination, and information sharing for the federal government for all types of emergencies as needed. And as Pepe has mentioned, we're in a search and recovery modality here and not consequence management per se. As you've heard, in Yukon and in Lake Huron, Canadian Forces and ourselves continue to support the RCMP in fulfilling its mandate, and the Canadian Coast Guard is also assisting. The RCMP, and I'm going to turn to my colleague in a second, is obviously considering both the Yukon and the Lake Huron events as matters of national security and are investigating accordingly. I'd otherwise just want to extend my thanks to everyone involved in these operations. Je remercie tous les membres de notre armée et celle des États-Unis qui ont participé à cette opération. It's obviously an ongoing and evolving situation, folks, and I'm happy to take questions. Merci beaucoup.
Do we have any other opening statements?
Yes, thank you. It's Sean McGillis from the RCMP, if I can take the floor. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sean McGillis. I'm the Acting Deputy Commissioner for Federal Policing Program at the RCMP, and happy to be here this afternoon. Thank you. The RCMP is actively engaged with international, federal, provincial, and territorial safety and security partners in response to the air incidents that have happened over the past several days. As part of our efforts, we are working in close collaboration with Indigenous community leaders in recognition of their rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership. The RCMP has deployed resources alongside CAF and the Canadian Coast Guard to retrieve the debris, and will be investigating the incident with domestic and international partners, including the FBI. The RCMP assesses and mitigates potential threats to Canada's national security on a case-by-case basis. The safety and security of our citizens is of the utmost importance to the RCMP, and we take all threats seriously. While we are not aware of any specific threat to the public at this time, we ask everyone to be cautious and to allow authorized personnel to respond to the incident. Should you locate any debris, please contact the RCMP directly. Bon après-midi tout le monde. Mon nom est Sean McGillis. Je suis le sous-commissaire à l'intérim pour la police fédérale de la GRC. La GRC collabore activement avec les partenaires internationaux, fédéraux, provinciaux et territoriaux du domaine de la sûreté et de la sécurité à la suite des incidents aériens au cours de la dernière semaine. Dans le cadre de nos efforts, nous agirons en étroite collaboration avec les dirigeants de collectivités autochtones. Ce travail sera fondé sur la reconnaissance des droits, le respect, la coopération et le partenariat. La GRC a déployé des ressources aux côtés des forces armées canadiennes pour récupérer les débris, et elle enquêtera sur l'incident avec les partenaires canadiens et étrangers, dont le FBI. La GRC évalue et atténue au cas par cas les menaces possibles pour la sécurité nationale du Canada. La sûreté et la sécurité des citoyens sont primordiales pour la GRC, et l'organisation prend toutes les menaces au sérieux. Bien que nous ne soyons au courant d'aucune menace particulière pour le public, nous demanderons à tous de ne pas s'approcher des lieux pour permettre au personnel autorisé d'intervenir à la suite de l'incident. Si vous trouvez des débris, s'il vous plaît, veuillez communiquer avec la GRC. Merci beaucoup.
Hello, my name is Marc-André Meunier. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for the Canadian Coast Guard Central Region. Canadian Coast Guard is supporting the operation in northeast section of Lake Huron. CCGS Griffin is now on scene. A Canadian Coast Guard drone is also on board and will be used in the search depending on weather condition. And we've got two Canadian Coast Guard helicopters assisting the search. The Coast Guard is also working closely with the RCMP. All operations are being connected and coordinated with the United States Coast Guard District 9. Bonjour à tous, je m'appelle Marc-André Meunier, je suis le commissaire adjoint pour la région du centre de la Garde côtière canadienne. La Garde côtière canadienne aide à localiser les débris dans la zone nord-est du lac Huron. Le NGCC Griffon est présentement dans la zone d'opération. Un drone est à bord du navire et sera utilisé selon la tenue météorologique. Nous avons aussi 2 hélicoptères de la Garde côtière qui participent également aux recherches. La Garde côtière travaille étroitement en collaboration avec la GRC et toutes nos opérations sont coordonnées avec le district 9 de la Garde côtière américaine. Merci.
We'll now start the question period. As usual, one question, one follow-up. Nous allons maintenant commencer la période de questions. Comme d'habitude, une question et une question de suivi. I invite the reporters on Zoom to use the raise hand function if you have a question. We'll start with Mackenzie Gray from Global.
Hello there. Thank you for taking the questions. Today at the White House, John Kirby said that it was his belief that the debris from the Lake Huron shoot down has landed in Canadian waters. Can you confirm that that is the case?
Perhaps I can, thank you for the question. I'll take the lead on answering that. Very early stages at this point in terms of our recovery efforts. I am not aware that we have located the debris at this point in the Lake Huron incident, but I can say that we are working very closely with our international partners, the U.S. Coast Guard, Canadian Coast Guard, ourselves at the RCMP. We have assets, air assets, and maritime assets that are looking into the locations, but at this point I'm not aware that the debris has made its way into Canadian soil or Canadian waters. Apologies. But we are actively engaged with our American counterparts on the recovery efforts.
Thank you for that. In the Yukon situation today, when the Prime Minister spoke, he gave quite a wide range of where the crash site could be, from I think Dawson City to Mayo. Is that the full scope of the area that we're looking for, or has there been an ability to pinpoint a smaller location within that to try and find the debris?
So again, I don't mind taking the lead on answering that, since the RCMP is the lead on the recovery efforts, and I will open obviously the floor to my colleagues from CAF on this one as they are providing us assistance on that. We are exploring a very large area. It is unfortunately very I guess rugged and mountainous terrain. The weather conditions are not great. There's a very high level of snowpack in the region, so our efforts are going to be difficult. They will be challenging. They will take us some time. We have started to undertake our recovery efforts and continue to look at trying to pinpoint the exact location, but at this point it's difficult, and we're being very methodical in using our all the capabilities that we have to try and pinpoint that. But I can say that this is not going to be an easy recovery and could potentially take us some time to locate the device.
Okay, maybe I can come in and support there, Mackenzie. So on that last question, we're using the wind models. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
We're using the wind models that were available at the time of the shoot down to narrow that area of search. Right now, what I've covered is our initial assessment is it's in the 3,000 square kilometer area. We're trying to pinpoint with more granularity in our models that we use for search and rescue and the rest of it. So our air experts are trying to narrow down this scope. And just a point of clarification on your first question, what we know is that the shoot down of the object over Lake Huron actually occurred in U.S. airspace. What we're trying to figure out, again, with the wind models and the currents as well, is if this could have drifted in Canadian airspace, but we don't have any evidence of that. Canadian waters, we don't have any evidence of that at this point. Thank you.
Next is Justin Ling.
Hey there, good afternoon. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate you might not be able to say much, but are you able to indicate anything in the flight pattern that would suggest that these devices are capable of propulsion or any sort of navigation, or are they entirely riding on the jet stream, essentially?
Thanks, Justin, there for the question. So mainly, these are lighter than air objects, even the first one that was at 60,000 feet and the follow-on objects that we've been following. They follow the wind pattern mainly. There's always ways you can steer any lighter than air object by modulating your altitude and use the air currents to navigate, but there's no, at this time, I would say, evidence of any propulsion system.
Okay, thanks very much. And I'm wondering, I realize we're still looking for the wreckage, but do we have any indication as to what payload they were carrying? Any indication that they may have been photographing areas, doing any sort of radar surveillance, any sort of electronic warfare capabilities? Do we have any indication on that front?
Thanks, Justin. I would say for the first one, the high altitude balloon that was shot in the US, there is a general understanding that this was a surveillance balloon. The investigation will tell us, or tell the US, because they're in charge of that investigation, what are the exact capabilities that it had. For the other three objects at this time, we have no information on what payload they could have carried or the capabilities that they have.
Next is Lee Bertium.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask, yesterday during his briefing, NORAD Commander General Van Herk said that there was an initial contact yesterday within Canadian airspace. It was tracked, I believe, going into U.S. airspace and then lost. And then subsequently, we had the shoot down over Lake Huron. How confident are we that the contact, what it was shot down over Lake Huron, correlates with the object that was, whatever the anomaly was, that was the contact over Canadian airspace earlier, prior to that?
Thanks, Lee. So I can confirm that the contact that was shut down on Lake Huron did originate in Canadian airspace, transited down south in the U.S. airspace and was monitored throughout its transit in the U.S. until it was shut down over Lake Huron yesterday. It did originate in the Canadian airspace.
Thank you. And just in terms of the shoot down over Yukon, we know that an American F-22 used an AIM-9X. Our CF-18s don't have the AIM-9X as of yet. Can you speak to the capability, whether the CF-18s, our CF-18s, had the capability to shoot down either that object or any of the other objects that, including the one over Lake Huron? Or were we reliant on U.S. because of the AIM-9X and other technology that they have that we don't?
Thanks, Lee, for the question. I think what's important to know here is that Canada and the U.S. work together in NORAD, and we use all the tools in our toolbox to address the threat that we face. There are capabilities on the F-18 that can take care of some of those objects, and there are tools as well in the U.S. inventory to take care of those. This is really dependent on the objects that we face, and there's always an ongoing analysis on what's the best tool to use for the situation we face. At this time, we were not asked to use CF-18s on any of those objects just because of where they were and where our resources in Canada were at the time. But there are capabilities on the F-18s that will be able to take care of some of those objects depending on where they are and what they are.
Next is Judy Trin.
Hi there. Thank you very much for taking this call. You had mentioned that in regards to the first air surveillance balloon, it was clear that it originated in China and it was a surveillance balloon. What do you need to know about the other three objects to determine their origin and determine exactly to characterize them? So I'm just asking for some background. What details are you looking for? What are the signs that you are seeking?
I'll probably let the RCMP speak to this one.
Sure. I was just trying to find my button there. Thanks, Judy. Well, as I mentioned in my opening comments, it is very early in terms of our recovery efforts. Until we locate these devices and have a true sense of what they are, it's difficult to say whether or not we can directly link them to the other incidents that we've had over the past few days. I will say that it is probably, I guess, where we consider it to be a coincidence that these we have multiple incidents happening that seem to be very similar, but that's just speculation at this point in terms of whether or not they're definitely connected until we're able to locate and do our review and assessment of the debris and to make sure that we have a true understanding of what we're dealing with here.
Judy, you might be on mute.
Hi there. Sorry about that. In John Kirby's briefing, he mentioned that there may have been 247 unidentified flying objects that may fall under this category of possible surveillance balloons. Do we know how many of that number has also passed across Canada, and when and how? Can you give us a sense of when we began tracking this, or if we have not and we just started this weekend as well?
Thanks again, Judy. I'll probably pass that to Major General Prevost, just given the difference in mandates here between the RCMP and CAF.
Thanks, Judy. So I'm not aware of all the balloons that the White House was talking about today. I would say that with the first high altitude balloon that came into the airspace in the last 2 weeks, we've been paying a lot of attention to our airspace to find and these new unidentified objects are even more recent than this. They started appearing after the high altitude balloon. Before that, there's been a few instances of objects of concern, one of which was in 1999. It was a weather balloon. So I'm not too sure. I'd have to look at what the White House spoke about, the 247 objects. But right now, the 3 objects that we found over the recent week, in the last week, were those of concern that we launched, detected, identified, and took action upon. Thank you.
Prochaine question pour Mélanie Marquis.
Oui, bonjour, j'espère que vous m'entendez. Je présume que oui. Ma question est pour le major général Prévost. Vous avez dit que les incursions étaient troublantes. Puis un peu pour rebondir sur ce que vous venez de dire, est-ce qu'elles sont troublantes mais récentes? C'est-à-dire que est-ce qu'il y en a eu beaucoup avant? Est-ce qu'on sait s'il y en a eu beaucoup dans les 5, 6, 10 dernières années?
Merci, Mélanie. Elles sont troublantes parce que non autorisées. Alors, on doit se pencher sur la question. Est-ce que c'est récent? Je vous dirais oui, c'est récent depuis la venue de la plus grosse ballonne qui venait de la Chine. On porte plus attention sur des objets non identifiés qui traversent l'espace aérien. On a eu ces 3 objets-là qui sont rentrés dans l'espace aérien dans les derniers jours. Alors, je vous dirais que c'est un phénomène assez récent et ça reste un phénomène troublant. Certainement, dans le cas du ballon que vous avez vu la semaine dernière, oui, en fait le 4 qui a été abattu aux États-Unis. Les autres objets, on se doit de les identifier, de les détecter, de les caractériser et prendre action selon le cas.
OK, donc si je comprends bien, on en voit davantage parce qu'on surveille davantage. Et puis, juste par rapport à la paternité ou la maternité de ces objets-là, les premiers, étaient chinois, mais est-ce qu'il y a des points en commun avec les 3 suivants qui permettraient de conclure que ça vient de la Chine ou, à contrario, que ça vient pas de la Chine? Je ne sais pas qui peut répondre à cette question-là.
Oui, tout ce qu'on peut dire en ce moment, c'est qu'il n'y a pas de lien direct entre le ballon de surveillance de provenance chinoise dont on a la preuve. Les 3 autres objets, on n'a pas réussi à établir le lien entre le ballon chinois et les 3 autres objets non identifiés, mais qui étaient quand même qui portaient des inquiétudes. On n'a pas réussi à établir le lien entre les 3 plus petits objets des derniers jours et l'événement d'il y a maintenant 10 jours.
Next is Stephen Chase.
Hi, Steve Chase here. I have a question and a follow-up. The first question is going back to Justin's question about payload. CNN just reported that a Pentagon memo says the flying object shot down in Canadian airspace Saturday appeared to be a small metallic balloon with a tethered payload below it. Can you confirm that?
Actually, I don't know if the RCMP wants to take that or myself.
Yeah, thanks, Major General. At this point, I think I'd have to say it's premature. We've not been able to locate the device at this point. Our recovery efforts are happening. We have our members on site in the Yukon and are beginning to deploy. But I think it would be premature at this point to speculate as to what the device looked like, what it contained, and what some of the concerns could be until we have a chance to actually locate it and exploit some of the information that could be contained therein.
Stephen, you might be on mute.
So with respect to the encounter between the object on Saturday night, was there any interference with the sensors of the airplanes that were in proximity to it? And secondly, how come you haven't released any pictures?
Okay, on the question of the interference, Stephen, so I'm not unfortunately going to be able to release any information on that. A more detailed analysis and will be conducted, and once we can share information about that, we will. In terms of the pictures, this will be under investigation. I'll leave it to probably Sean to answer that question.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we have no actual confirmation or visual that we can share at this point. We're really looking at hopefully having some success through our recovery efforts, so we get a better understanding of what we're dealing with here. But at this point, I can't say that we have anything that we'd be able to share that talks about images or what the devices look like that I'm aware of.
Next is Paul Vieira.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I want to go back to something earlier because I just want to confirm it for my own purposes. I believe in an answer to a previous question, you said officials said that the object that eventually was taken down above Lake Huron originated in Canadian aerospace, and then made its way through perhaps northern U.S. to. Can you be more precise about where it originated? Like where did it fly, or where was it in Canada before it got south to the U.S.?
I can confirm there, Paul. Thanks for the question. I can confirm that the object that was shut down over Lake Huron transited through the northern U.S. across the Midwest there, and actually originated in Canadian aerospace in southern Alberta. And the investigation will show where exactly it originated if we can find it. Right now, I can tell you that the first contact we had on it was in southern Alberta.
Okay. Today, the Prime Minister, at least a few times, talked about how some of the experts, there were some experts in the search team with expertise in hazardous materials. Why, and the Prime Minister seemed to make an emphasis on this. Why, what is the concern? Like, what do officials or investigators fear was in these objects that would require hazardous experts to be on site?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I can take that question, and I appreciate that. I'll be honest, I haven't heard the Prime Minister's comments today, but I can tell you from a recovery effort, because we don't know what this is, we're exercising an abundance of caution. So in our deployment, we are sending out investigators. We are sending out folks with explosives capability. We're sending out folks with that chemical, biological, radiological background, only because we don't know what we're dealing with. As soon as we start to locate, hopefully in the next, as soon as we can, we'll have a much better appreciation for what we're dealing with. But it's an exercise of caution in any situation like this where we're not sure what we're dealing with. You always err on the side of being overly cautious, and that's why we're deploying the specialized expertise that we are.
Thank you.
Prochaine question pour Boris Proux.
Oui, bonjour. Désolé si ça a déjà été dit plus tôt, mais j'aimerais que vous me confirmiez, est-ce qu'on peut bel et bien parler pour tous ces objets-là, est-ce que c'est bien des ballons? Est-ce qu'on peut les qualifier comme ça?
Boris, merci pour la question. Je dois dire, c'est les trois autres objets, autres que le ballon de surveillance de haute altitude qui venait de Chine. Les autres objets sont clairement des objets qui sont plus légers que l'air. Ça semble être des ballons de beaucoup plus petite envergure, mais pour le moment, c'est impossible de vous donner la réponse exacte. Mais je dois dire, ça ressemble à des ballons, mais on doit les trouver pour savoir qu'est-ce que c'était exactement.
Merci. Et en suivi, quelle est la probabilité qu'il y ait d'autres ballons ou d'autres objets de ce type que vous me décrivez là, qui ont pu, dans le passé, passer et échapper à notre détection?
Boris, je peux pas vous le dire pour l'instant. Évidemment, toutes nos équipes, autant du côté américain que canadien, dans le commandement du NORAD, mais aussi toutes les autres agences qui sont impliquées, on porte une attention particulière à l'espace aérien en ce moment. Tout semble avoir commencé avec d'abord le ballon à haute altitude qui venait de Chine. On regarde évidemment avec tout ce qu'on a dans nos livres et dans nos banques de données si d'autres objets auraient pu être de ça, mais pour l'instant, ça semble tous arriver à ce moment-ci. Et pour le futur, c'est impossible de spéculer à savoir si ça va se reproduire ou non.
Next is Marina van Stackelberg.
Good afternoon. Prime Minister Trudeau said today that obviously there is some sort of pattern here. Was the Prime Minister wrong?
Maybe I'll start on this one, which is a bit what I just explained to Boris. There seems to be a pattern. What we're trying to find out if that pattern is coherent, if there's a correlation between the high-altitude balloon and those three objects that have been transiting to the airspace lately. There's a pattern. Everybody can speculate that there. We're trying to find out if this pattern is actually actual or not.
And my follow-up, what can you tell us about these three other objects? A senior U.S. official said in an Associated Press story yesterday that the most recent one over Lake Huron was octagonal with strings hanging from it. What can you tell us about these three objects? And is it possible that you won't locate these most recent ones?
I'll maybe speak to the question around our ability to locate, and then maybe Major General will have some comments on the actual maybe descriptions of the different devices. So right now we are working very hard to locate them, but there's no guarantee that we will. The terrain in the Yukon is rather treacherous right now, so it could pose some significant challenges to us in terms of our recovery efforts. The same could be said about what's taking place in Lake Huron. The marine conditions are also not conducive at the moment for our rescue efforts, although we're doing our best to use the capabilities that we have to try and locate it. We're very hopeful that we will have success. We're working very closely across the government of Canada with all the different partners that are implicated, as well as with our American partners. But there's no guarantee that we'll have success in recovering any of these.
Next is
Steph. Go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
And I was just going to add there, what we know about these objects right now is they're unauthorized, they're unwanted, they are of concern, so we have to continue to try to find them. There is right now these three last objects didn't look like anything like the first one that we dealt with, which I think everybody saw on TV, the high altitude balloon. The other ones were smaller in size, all different, but followed the same pattern. But I'll repeat here. They're of concern, they're unwanted, unauthorized, so we have to continue to find them to understand what is going on, and we will continue in Canada and the United States to turn attention to the safety of the airspace and safety of Canadians and the U.S. citizens. Thank you.
Next is Stephanie Levitz.
Hi there. With regards to the object, I guess currently in Lake Huron, you referenced earlier that your first point of contact was in southern Alberta. From that, are we to understand that it originated in southern Alberta, or it just first came to your attention in southern Alberta? And if that's the case, we know that you're using wind patterns to figure out where they landed. So are you using wind patterns to figure out where they came from, and where did they come from?
I think, Stephanie, you kind of answered the question there. It was first, we first got the evidence of that balloon in southern Alberta. We were able to track it through its travel in the United States all the way to Lake Huron. What we're turning our heads to right now is to find out if we had picked it up before as well in Canadian airspace or U.S. airspace.
So are you using the wind patterns to figure out where these objects or balloons originated? And what can you tell us about that analysis so far? I mean, how many, I don't know, do you know how long they were aloft, for example, before you spotted them in North American airspace, or did they originate from North America? Do we know where they're coming from?
So the high altitude balloon that came from China entered through Alaska already 10 days ago, or even more. I haven't done the math, but yeah, about 10 days ago. We know how this one came through, and we're able to track it through the wind models and our sensors and all the airplanes that were involved in that operation. In terms of the smaller objects, the one that was shut down in Alaska, we were able to track throughout. The one that was shut down in Yukon, we were able to track throughout. It was following the wind pattern, originated also on the west coast of Alaska. The only one that we're unsure of where it came from is the one that showed up in Alberta, but following the same wind models.
Next is Brian Platt.
Hi, I'm just trying to understand the range of possibilities here for what this could be. Can you just explain the process if there's a legitimate like research balloon or device or object, like an organization, a commercial organization, or I don't know, an NGO, somebody doing research with one of these balloons? Generally, is there a process where they inform you of a flight path of that, or is that either a rule or a general procedure that's usually followed in a case of somebody putting up, say, for collecting research?
Thanks, Brian. Unfortunately, to answer this one, we would have to turn to Transport Canada. I'm not sure if we do have Transport Canada with us.
Okay. So should I just go on to a follow-up then?
Okay, maybe Brian, I can answer part of the question. So in North American Defense Command, as well as NORTHCOM, all the agencies are plugged into this command. So when there are activities that are governmental activities or any legitimate body that are floating balloons around, there are procedures for that. And those balloons are disregarded, not disregarded, but at least there's a process around them. The one that we're dealing with right now are the ones that were unauthorized, unwanted, of concern, that nobody could pinpoint to any activity or legitimate activity.
Okay, and I guess from what I understand, based on I think this is sort of the briefings in the United States that have said this, but like the reason why we're suddenly finding all these balloons over the past, or these whatever they are, these objects over the past week, is that after the Chinese surveillance balloon was found, we kind of changed the filters on radars, started kind of changing the way we looked for these things. Are you able to say, like, is this a total surprise to find all these unauthorized objects in our airspace, or were we kind of aware that these were out there before and we just didn't really take action on them?
Yeah, Brian, we're unable to tell right now. This is what we're trying to find out. I would say it's a bit of a combination of both. There is now more awareness about these objects, but these objects would have at least tuned our radars at one point. And right now we're looking back in time to see if we've seen similar patterns in the past, but nobody remembers seeing any like that. So this is what we're doing right now. We're obviously paying more attention to our airspace, but there's no evidence that any of that activity appeared in the past, but we're looking back in the recent history to see if we would have seen some of those contacts previously.
Prochaine question pour Anne-Caroline Desplanques. Anne-Caroline, est-ce que vous nous entendez? Malheureusement, Anne-Caroline, on ne vous entend pas ici. Je vous suggère de peut-être vous déconnecter, de vous reconnecter. On va passer à la prochaine question pour Dimitri Sevastopoulou.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Oui, allô, est-ce que vous m'entendez?
Can you hear me okay?
So,
allô?
Dimitri, we'll start with Anne-Caroline and then we'll go back to you. Anne-Caroline, c'est à vous.
Allô?
Laisse faire. Dimitri, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks. You said that the object that was shot down on Sunday was detected when it was over southern Alberta. So I'm wondering, does that suggest that you have a domain awareness gap of the kind that General Van Herk has talked about? And if so, how are you addressing that gap? And then separately, I think the general said there was a general understanding that the object shot down on Sunday was a surveillance balloon. But a couple of hours ago, John Kirby said there was no evidence so far that these three objects were engaging in surveillance, but of course he couldn't rule it out. So I just want to square the circle. Why do you seem to have slightly different interpretations?
Yeah, so Dimitri, on the issue of was the balloon on Sunday of surveillance, only when we find it, we're going to be able to say for sure what it was. What we could see was a balloon floating around of a bigger size that we would normally see, but not as big as the high altitude surveillance balloon with no big array like we've seen on the first one. Finding that balloon will be important to understand what it was. In terms of how it popped up in southern Alberta, there are gaps that we're turning our heads to. Now, they're smaller in size, harder to find through radar, through ground radar or air surveillance radar. So we're turning our minds to how can we address those gaps in the future.
And just to follow up, if I can, you just said that the object on Sunday, you called it a balloon. So is it definitively a balloon?
Yeah, I think the best word I can use here is a suspected balloon. it's clearly objects that are lighter than air. We cannot see any propulsion system at this time. Their shapes vary. They might be balloons. Finding these objects will help us find a bit more on what they are and how they move around.
Thank you.
We have only a few minutes left. We'll try to squeeze as many questions as possible. Next is David Common.
Yes, thanks very much for doing this. And Major General, perhaps I can start with you just by asking about the Yukon incident. The CF-18s that launched out of Cold Lake, I wonder if you just give us a little more detail. Were they alert aircraft? How many were launched? And what were they carrying in terms of weapon systems? Did they have their targeting pods? Did they have missiles? The Gatling gun ammunition loaded? If you just give us a little bit more information on that.
Yeah, thanks, David, for the question. Good question here. I'm going to partly answer it. They were airplanes available to NORAD to participate in the operation. They were scrambled to continue to participate in the operation. As we saw that this balloon was going to transit from Alaska all the way to Yukon, they were getting in the vicinity of the operation when the F-22, the US F-22, shut down those balloons. Those F-18s were sent to participate. They had the capability to participate in our operation. I'm not going to reveal all the details about the sensors and the weapons that were on board, but they were sent to continue the operation should the US not be able to continue any further as this transited through the Canadian airspace.
Okay. I was going to ask about recovery in Lake Huron, but just so I've got the timeline clear, the CF-18s arrived after or just as the 22 had engaged the object.
Yeah, they were very close. They were within minutes of being with the F-22s there when the F-22s engaged. So they were ready to take over from the US at that point.
Understood. Okay. Thank you.
And we'll take a last question from Ken Paul. Ken, you might be on mute.
All right, I was muted. Beg your pardon, gentlemen. Thank you for this. I have a question that maybe public safety can answer since transport is not involved in this briefing. Given the fact that the initial balloon was well above commercial airspace, can you say how much or whether commercial airplanes at 40,000 and below were affected, diverted at this stage?
If you're speaking about the original one early on, there was a NOTAM put in place by Transport Canada. I can't speak to the details, but I believe it lasted 4 days, and that was for the original very high altitude Chinese balloon.
But nothing about the three smaller objects.
I think those were very localized, and I think actually the U.S. Air Force, among other things, had declared them a certain type of operational zone. But Paul may be able to elaborate on the exact language.
Yes. So to come back to the question there, on the high altitude one, it was transiting at such an altitude that it was not of concern to civil aviation. On the three other objects, they could have been a challenge for a safety concern for general aviation, but since we had custody of those three objects as they transited the airspace, we didn't have to publish a NOTAM, but rather have controllers vector civil aviation around them, since we were transiting with NORAD assets with those objects as it transited the airspace. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
This is all the time we had. This concludes the technical briefing. Ceci est tout le temps que nous avions. Ça met fin au briefage technique d'aujourd'hui. Merci à tous. Thank you.